Mount Fuji appears silent, perfect, almost untouched. But around this sacred beauty, ancient Japanese stories reveal another face of the mountain. On the trails, forests, and lakes of Fuji, strange sounds, mysterious lights, and hidden creatures have crossed generations as dark warnings. Tengu, Fuji Kitsune, Mujina, the three-legged Japanese badger, and Kappa are not just folklore monsters. They are echoes of fear, respect, and ancestral memory. Today, the Enigma Japan enters the invisible territory of Fuji, where the mountain ceases to be a landscape and becomes a living mystery, sacred, dark, unsettling, and impossible to ignore for those who listen to its legends. Among the mists of Mount Fuji, ancient legends whisper the presence of the Tengu, supernatural beings of the mountains, feared and revered for their connection to strange sounds, invisible voices, and persistent mysteries. In the Japanese imagination, they were spiritual entities associated with the invisible and phenomena that have challenged human logic for centuries on the slopes of Fuji. As one ascends the mountain, the atmosphere changes. At the fifth station, the silence thickens, as if the traveler crosses an invisible boundary. There existed the Garden of the Tengu, seen not as a mere landscape, but as a sacred territory, feared by countless local pilgrims, ancient travelers, and residents who respected their signs, their hidden warnings, and their presence on cold nights. The mist, the silence, and the altitude reinforced the feeling of being within an invisible realm, where the presence of the Tengu seemed closer to the human frontier. At the heart of this sacred region is the Fuji-san Komitake shrine, enveloped in silence, fog, and deep reverence. For many pilgrims, this place marked the entrance to a spiritual dimension of Mount Fuji. The shrine is associated with Komitake Tarobo Shoshin, a spiritual entity linked to the Tengu and the protection of the mountain. Therefore, it was seen as a point of contact between the human world and the invisible. In the courtyard, a massive ancient axe draws attention. Weighing around 375 kilograms, it was viewed not only as a sacred object, but as a sign of the extraordinary strength attributed to the Tengu. As night fell over the fifth station, the forest seemed to change in nature. Among the dark trunks, sounds emerged from uncertain places. Branches swayed without wind. Strange voices crossed the darkness, and silence was broken by inexplicable sounds. For many travelers, that was not of the forest. They were signs of the presence of the Tengu, ancient and feared. In an ancient cabin on the mountain, fear took hold of the travelers. Outside, heavy footsteps slowly approached, breaking the silence of the night and making everyone believe that something supernatural was lurking in the place. Suddenly, a hairy hand emerged through the opening of the cabin, and a voice asked for food. Terror gripped everyone. For those who heard this story, that visitor was not human, but a hungry Tengu wandering the mountain. Another legend tells that a small man appeared, carrying a gigantic axe up the mountain. The scene seemed impossible. The weight was absurd, but he moved silently, as if that strength did not belong to the ordinary world. When he reached the sanctuary, the man left the axe before the sacred space and disappeared. For the locals, this confirmed that the mountain hid forces beyond human reason. On Mount Fuji, the Tengu remain between legend and fear. Invisible to the eyes, but alive in the imagination, they have transformed the mountain into a sacred territory, where silence sometimes seems to hide something watching. Suddenly, the few lanterns were no longer few. New points of fire appeared on the mountain, one after another, as if invisible hands were slowly lighting up the dark slope. The lights multiplied until they formed an impossible path, winding through the night like a procession without bodies. The mountain seemed to breathe fire. In that moment, The entire village began to believe in what it saw. No one spoke. No one questioned. The glow dominated the eyes of the villagers. The boundary between festival, miracle, and deception began to disappear before Fuji. But among the villagers was an old man who knew ancient stories. He watched the lights for a longer time, in deep silence. And, little by little, his face stopped showing enchantment. He then warned the village. That was neither a procession nor a miracle. It was an illusion of Fujigitsune, the spiritual fox of Fuji, capable of deceiving an entire crowd.
Then, from behind the forest, real buses appeared. Its lights crossed the night, simple, human, common, almost disappointing. But the question remained, was it just an illusion of the eyes, a natural phenomenon, or the silent trail of the Fuji Kitsune? In the final silence of the mountain, only doubt remained. What the eyes saw that night was an illusion, a natural phenomenon, or the invisible passage of the Fuji Kitsune, hidden among mists, ancient beliefs, and memories that no one dared to erase from there. As if the mountain held a truth that always refused definitive human explanation.
Before the forest reveals its curse, 3 destinies cross the mist of Aokigahara: G, R, and E. Among the motionless trees, the Mujina already watches them in silence. In the deep shadow of Aokigahara, it is said that certain animals do not walk only on the ground. Some carry ancient memories, hidden wounds, and forgotten pacts in the night, as if each step repeated a pain that never ended. Among twisted roots, damp stones, and volcanic rocks, the story of the 3-legged Mujina emerged, a creature marked by pain, loss, and eternal silence. Its body seemed ordinary from a distance, but those who looked closer noticed the imbalance. One leg was missing, and something much older, heavier, darker, and more terrifying remained. The ancient inhabitants said that it was not born monstrous.
It became so after falling into a cruel trap set by greedy hunters near the dark forest. The blade not only tore off its front leg, she opened an invisible boundary between the wounded animal and the vengeful spirit of the Fuji forest. That night, while the Fuji stood still in the distance, the Mujina disappeared into the cold mist, leaving dark blood on the black stones of the forgotten trail. Since then, some travelers swear they hear her incomplete, dragging footsteps in the mud, before a low growl fades among the trees, like an ancient warning to those who dare to go on alone.
At the foot of Mount Fuji stood an isolated village, wrapped in low clouds, wooden houses, and damp paths. There lived R, a silent widow, with her son E. Their life was poor, yet it still held a fragile peace. The days moved slowly, marked by cold winds, humble work, and the silence of the mountains. R&E seemed protected by routine, but that peace began to crumble when G appeared on the trail, like a shadow carrying an omen. No one knew where G had come from, or what stories hid inside those worn clothes and cold eyes. The closer G came to R's house, the more the world seemed to lose its light. Even the air grew heavy, as if tragedy itself were breathing. As the days passed, G stopped being distant. Near the widow's house, G studied every silence, fear, and weakness. Then G crossed the threshold, not as someone asking for shelter, but as someone claiming another person's space. Inside, presence became domination.
G occupied corners, glances, and silences. R withdrew. Fear, control, and threat spread slowly. Evil had taken root beneath the mountain's silent, watching shadow.
He saw the violence take the house. Without the strength to confront G, he fled to the forest, carrying only fear in his chest. Behind him, The village disappeared under dense shadows. The woods swallowed his footsteps. Each tree seemed to lean over his path like an ancient warning. The fog closed in on his vision, and he ran without knowing where to go, alone. After that, he disappeared. There was no scream, clear trace, or answer. Just the empty trail, the cold wind, and the forest keeping its silence as an accomplice to the entire night of Aokigahara. The crime was hidden under the fog, far from the village, in the dark belly of Aokigahara. Among roots and damp earth, Ji tried to bury his own dark guilt and his crime as well. The earth received the secret, but the forest also did not accept it in silence. The fog thickened, the branches seemed to watch, and something invisible awakened in that deep darkness. That night, evil was hidden, but it was also summoned. In the place of the burial, Aokigahara remained still, as if preparing its own response against Ji, slowly, in the eternal shadows. Days later, a great Mujina emerged among the trees of Aokigahara, as if the freshly disturbed earth had summoned it. Its body resembled a badger, but there was something ancient in its gaze, something beyond the animal world. It moved slowly, sniffing the mist, drawn by an invisible force. In the darkness of the forest, an ancient trap lay hidden beneath damp leaves and broken branches. The Mujina approached, unaware of the danger. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if every root knew that this moment would mark a curse. Then the trap closed. The Mujina fell, wounded, but not defeated. One paw was caught by the iron, and its pain pierced through the night. In that suffering, something changed. Its gaze hardened, filled with fury and vengeance. Thus was born the three-legged Mujina, a symbol of hidden crime and punishment in the shadows of Aokigahara. Since then, the Mujina began to haunt Ji's path, invisible among trunks and mist. No one saw him in full, but his eyes emerged in the darkness, promising revenge. On a dark night, the trap moved on its own, creaking over damp leaves, as if obeying an invisible will. The forest seemed to guide the iron against the buried crime. This is how punishment reached Ji. Among shadows, he realized too late that he was not walking alone. Justice came faceless, merely as a supernatural force returning to the guilty the weight of the evil committed. After Ji's death, silence returned to Aokigahara, but it was not empty. It was attentive, heavy, as if the forest continued to hold everything it had witnessed. On the damp ground, 3 paw prints appeared. Always 3, deep and clear, like a warning left in the earth for those who dared to forget the legend.
Because the Mujina did not leave, continuously haunting Aokigahara, invisible and watchful, waiting for new lost steps beneath the cold night mist. Always 3, deep and clear, like a warning left on the ground for those who dared to forget the legend.
Today, few say they believe in the legend of Mujina, but no one crosses Aokigahara at night without hearing their own fear more clearly in the cold fog of Fuji. Because some legends don't need to be fully revealed. Just a missing footprint, 3 steps in the fog, and Fuji silently above the ancient dark forest. In the Kawaguchi-ko Lake, ancient legends speak of the Kappa, water spirits of the 5 lakes of Fuji. Mischievous, mysterious, dangerous beings feared by the residents of the quiet and isolated area. Nearby, a sacred cedar challenged any axe, and it is said that when wounded, a thick, unsettling, almost supernatural red sap flowed from it during the brutal cut. To defeat it, they cut its base and threw it into the waters, but the cedar sank upright, as if cursed, remaining erect, silent, and intact beneath the sacred deep lake. Years later, a young diver swore he saw, at the bottom of Kawaguchi-ko, a creature hidden among deep shadows, moving slowly in the dark, cold waters of the lake. In Shodi Lake, during the night, a fisherman cast his net and felt something too heavy to be a fish, caught from the depths of the dark water. The net stretched with brutal force, and two men had to join forces to pull that enormous dark mass from the deep waters of the lake.
Pull harder!
When it finally emerged, the creature stood up on two legs, taking the form that many would call a Kappa, a water spirit feared by the ancient inhabitants. Since then, the Kappa has become a moral warning, a legend created to keep children away from the deep waters and the invisible dangers that dwelled there. In the lakes of Fuji, the Kappa is not just a legendary creature, but the ancient fear hidden in the cold silence of the dark and stagnant water. Perhaps that is why its legend still survives, reminding that all deep beauty also demands respect, caution, and reverence in the face of the unknown, always present there.